All right. I am recording today through OBS as opposed to Facebook Live. So this is a trial and I'm hoping it does exactly what it's supposed to do. And I have no idea why I'm orange. All right. I'm looking at the camera. I'm looking at my monitor screen and I'm looking at my camera again. This is for me. I just got a new camera the other day and I'm like going through some trials. I have some lights coming so my face won't be orange anymore, hopefully. And then I have a new microphone coming. Oh my God, yes. So by Saturday, Sunday, my streaming quality is going to be like through the roof. Oh, yeah. Providing the user error is not going to be an ongoing issue. All right, we are talking about grounding. Grounding. I love grounding. So we hear a lot of grounding from two sources. The first source that we hear grounding from is in psychology. The second source is astrology. I don't know if you would call it astrology. It's basically energy readers. So grounding in psychology means, and then there's the philosophical concept of grounding. So I'm going to go over psychology, and then I'm going to go over the energy, and then I'm actually going to talk about the philosophy of what actually grounding is. So in psychology, grounding is stabilizing yourself through a PTSD episode. That's it. It's when you are dealing with a trauma, when you are spiraling out of control, when you have emotional breakdown, the psychologists and the therapists go, ground yourself. And it's basically take yourself out of the present, or I'm sorry, out of the past, and put yourself in the now. Ground yourself in the present moment. And then there is the process of using your five senses. And this is the problem, but we'll get into that in a minute. Then there's the process of using your five senses to remind yourself that you are not in a horrible situation where you used to be. So you use, and this is also what you see a lot in havening. Name 5 things that you see, 4 things that you smell, 3 things that you hear, 2 things that you can touch, 1 thing that you can say. That's in havening. Now, in havening, it's imagination, which is fantastic. In psychology, it is the plane of existence on the material side only. In traditional psychology, modern psychology, there is this concept that we're not going to acknowledge the fantasy realm and it doesn't exist. But in philosophy and in physics and in science, oh yes, it does exist. In classical psychology, it exists. That is like the whole realm of what philosophy actually explores is the abstract realm. So in modern psychology, that's completely thrown out and banned for concrete thinkers, and concrete thinkers say, well, if it's not something physical that I can touch with my 5 senses, then it's not real. And so there's like a war and a dispute between concrete and abstract thinkers determining whether or not the abstract world exists. But there's 3 points. Money, time, and mathematics are all 3 abstract concepts that 100% come from the abstract world. Oh yes, they do exist because we use them in our day-to-day life. This is why we hear people saying money doesn't even exist. It's a concept. Well, yeah, that's correct. Time doesn't exist. It's a concept. It's abstract. So there's this dispute going on. And by the way, this is all mindset. Mindset doesn't exist. This is absolutely the core of existentialism in philosophy. So now we're going to flip on over to astrology. In astrology, there is this concept that grounding means, I really don't know what energy readers define grounding as. I really don't know what they mean when they say grounding. I don't. All I know is they hand you some amethyst and say, here, ground yourself with this chakra stone. Now, I do that, but I know what I'm doing. Now, when I first started grounding, first of all, the first time I heard the concept of grounding was in psychology. In philosophy, we don't call it grounding. We call it something else. In psychology, we don't call it grounding. So the first time I heard grounding was from my therapist, and they're talking about grounding, and I'm like, and it was a Ground yourself, but only in the material plane, and don't acknowledge that the abstract planes exist. In fact, throw away the abstract plane, which is the problem. Now, I used to ground myself in the material plane, and that was my problem. I can't be grounded in the material plane. I cannot be grounded in the material plane because this is not where I am grounded. I am grounded in the abstract realm because I grew up in the abstract realm. My zero, my center is the abstract. This is why I'm an ethereal walker, is because I was born, raised, and indulged 100% in the abstract realm. I didn't understand the material plane. I still am trying to figure out the material plane. The abstract plane makes sense to me. That is solid. And when I pulled in my philosophy and I looked into the studies of philosophy and how they view the abstract versus the material, it was a whole nother, like I said, this is my world, is the abstract world. So concrete thinking is like, yeah, there's a conflict, and no one's really willing or able to decide or agree on what real is. Concrete thinkers define it as X, abstract thinkers define it as we don't know, and we're exploring that. And philosophy is existentialism, and it's all out there. And then there's where I stand with all three of them, looking at all of them going, can we please examine Don Quixote and Alice in Wonderland while we're at it? So as far as what astrology is doing, I really cannot figure out how they define grounding. If you are into astrology and you're talking about grounding yourself, I would love to hear your insight. Now, from philosophy, and this is my realm. So philosophy doesn't call it grounding. My beautiful, beautiful Socrates and Plato. The whole of philosophy is actually asking the question, what is real? It's literally the abstract science of, will define real. And this is like what kickstarted all of it, is trying to figure out what is real. Now, why this matters is because when you ground yourself, you need to ground yourself basically in a stable point. So, yeah, I'm gonna get to that in a minute, because now we're getting into perspective psychology, and I'm gonna get back into perspective psychology. Now, my psychology is perspective psychology. I'm the founder of perspective psychology. That's my work. That's what I do. Perspective psychology is 100% psychology based off of philosophical works. There are other things that also stem off of philosophy in psychology, but not very much, because Freud, who was not a philosopher, who had no business opening his mouth, stepped in and hypothesized some stuff. He was a medical doctor. He had no background at all in philosophy. Therefore, he had no background in psychology. Now, Carl Jung had a background in philosophy. So Carl Jung's philosophy, which is why Jungian philosophy is a whole nother branch. And if you actually study Jungian philosophy or Jungian psychology, it's a completely different creature than what Freud studied. So you have this divide between Carl Jung and Freud. Freud was I'll be blunt, a moronic medical doctor who had no idea what he was talking about, which is why a lot of his stuff is just useless. But traditional modern psychology is based off of Freud's work. Carl Jung, on the other hand, was philosophical based, completely different creature. Beautifully, beautifully mastered material, because he studied the abstract, because he studied existentialism. So you require the studies of philosophy in order to understand psychology, which is why psychology today is not efficient, is because it absolutely lacks the 2,000-year core premise of what it's based on. So that being said, grounding is your perspective. It is your truth. It is based off of basically the defined center of truth from your identifiers located in the philosopher's compass. So you have your three identifiers. You have identity. You have self, the definition of the self. You have the definition of the relative, and you have the definition of your imagination. When these three things combined, you find your truth, your perspective, which is reality in the dead center. And that is the philosopher's compass. And then in my last video, we talked about how people come in, relatives, and all this other noise comes in, and there's basically a lot of shouting, and there's a lot of noise. Now, this is it right here. This is grounding. Grounding is the process of cleansing your perspective. Let's assume for a moment that we all had perfect lives and we all grew up stable with beautiful homes. Let's pretend that for a minute. You have your comfort zone versus your growth zone and then your fear zone. This is how nurturing when you're an infant is supposed to work. You have the mom or the caregiver, the nurturer, and the child has their defined center here at the mother, the caregiver. And the child, 2 years old, they discover they can walk and they run off and they explore. They go too far, they get afraid, they come back. They reestablish themselves at the core center of the mother. This is Human Development 101. Now, if your mother is loving, gentle, and, well, if you're caregiver, if you're nurturer, we need to stop using gender roles here. If your nurturer is properly efficient and educated, they will receive you, teach you how to self-comfort, give you the skills, train you in the skills to soothe yourself. That way, when you're out in the growth zone and you reach fear, instead of coming back to the comfort zone, you'll actually soothe yourself. That's what's supposed to happen. As a result, you don't require the nurturer, and you no longer have the enabling of the nurturer taking care of your soothing for you. That leaves the question, what is the comfort zone for? Grounding. Not enabling your comfort or security, grounding, cleansing your perspective. Here's how it works. So you go on all of these massive adventures. You're awesome. You explore stuff. Now, while you're out, you are receiving data, mostly words. You're receiving words and opinions from other people, yourself, and basically you have your perspective, your defined truth at your philosopher's compass. The self, your perspective is defined. But as you explore and you grow, you hear all these different perspectives. And you start to lose your own perspective. So you go back to the comfort zone and you isolate yourself. And assuming that your relatives are matched in your philosophy and your psychology and your perspective and your ethics, you go back to your family. You remember who you are. This is like a whole Simba Lion King thing. You remember who you are, what your heading is, what your mission statement is, what your purpose is. You re-cleanse and you purify your perspective and your truth. You remember who you are. You throw out all the invasive perspectives. And now you've grounded yourself. Now you've redefined yourself. You have remembered who you are. And then you can go back out and adventure again with a solid status of this is who I am. All of the philosophy does nothing except explore this concept. That's all it does, is explore this concept. Define reality. What is the truth? What is real? That is all that philosophy needs and wants to do, is define this center truth. Who are we? What are we? Where are we going? And why are we here? The compass. The compass is the self is who we are. Our imagination and our dreams is where we're going, and our relativity tells us where we've been. Why we are here is our truth, our perspective. We are here for whatever reason we want to be here, defined upon our solid truth. What is reality? Reality is an opinion. There is no fact, because fact has to be based on the archetype. This is lesson 1 of philosophy. The archetype is the unchanging, completely solid and defined, omniscient identity. It is also perceived as being something that is out there. It's the energy pool. It's the energy pool. It's nature. It is the unchanging, completely solid, 100% stable, always there archetype. It's the nature. It's the energy pool. So that when you have your defined self, when you have who you are, what you are, and you realize that fact literally alters and gets changed based on how only physics allows you to see it, based upon the rules of physics within your universe, then your definition is revolving around the physics. The physics has a significant love affair happening with the electromagnetic field. In fact, that's all it's doing. Like physics and philosophy are like, oh my God, are they like they are yin and yang here. Physics and philosophy are like a thing. And the more physics is doing its thing and the more, well, philosophy's got its thing, it's literally just kind of coming together in this gorgeous collide. And at the center is the energy pool, the electromagnetic field. So our relationship to this electromagnetic field really is the solid definition of, okay, this is the solid standpoint. Now, the physics, electromagnetic field, basically is broken off into two parts. There is the physical realm, and then there is the abstract realm. The physical realm being what we can physically see, what we are limited to by our five senses. Now, here's the kicker. Our five senses change from person to person. They are individual and unique. Our eyes see color differently. That's why some people are colorblind. Our eyes, everything is a spectrum. So some people will see one shade of pink, other people will see a shade of orange. You can sit there and haggle all day long as you want. At the end of the day, it's an opinion because no two set of eyes are the same. And eyesight, color, reception, that is all hooked up to the brain. No two brains are alike. They are as unique as a fingerprint. There is a belief, and this is a toxic belief, that our five senses are identical. They are about as identical as a fingerprint. We hear things different. We taste things different. Some people taste a lemon and taste sweet. I taste sweet when I taste lemons. Other people will taste sour when they taste lemons. Other people love eating raw onion right out of the ground. Other people can't stand onion. These are opinions. The five senses are opinions. Now, every time you open your mouth to perceive something, to communicate something, you are spouting an opinion. Even if you see it, doesn't mean that somebody else did, which means our perspective is a unique opinion. Fact does not exist. Period. In science, there is something referred to as the biased factor, which is the scientists themselves sitting there trying to do research X amount of times, and while they're doing this research, it is within a controlled environment. But the human factor must be taken into account. The human factor is that the scientists themselves will subconsciously desire a certain outcome and therefore alter the experiment to get a desired result. The biased ethic, the biased, what is it called? It's got a scientific term to it, the biased factor. I think it's called the biased factor. So even the biased fallacy. Yeah, that's it. The biased fallacy. It's when in science it has to be taken into account that even if you are in a controlled environment, you still have the scientist. And the scientist absolutely is still basing all of his research, their research, based on what the subconscious mind is allowing them to do. So there is no guarantee that even the scientific data that we have coming out is solid. That always must be taken into account. Now let's take something like gravity. One can always say, hey, gravity absolutely is X. And we have mathematics and physics that breaks down on this particular planet we have X, and on this particular moon/planet, this is the gravitational pull. It's changing. It's not a constant because the atmosphere now changes. Now, I'm going to point out once again that that information is based off of an abstract science, mathematics, something that is not corporeal. So to say that the abstract world, aka imagination, does not exist is no different than saying mathematics does not exist, because mathematics is imagination. It is something that somebody literally put into creation from imagination, that they pulled out of the imaginative realm, the abstract. Same thing with time, and same thing with money. Money is karma. It's the karma bank. But you have concrete thinkers who couldn't comprehend this. So they required something corporeal so they could understand it, which is why they invented the clock, the sundial, and then the clock. And then later they invented coinage and money because concrete thinkers could not understand the concept of energy or karma or mathematics. Bookkeeping was invented to track the abstract abstract concept of mathematics. And if you look up mathematics, it is defined as an abstract science. It is not real. The abstract very much exists. Now, the rest of philosophy basically spends the 2,000-year plus history examining everything that identifies and defines what is real and what is not. The question is, if you can't see it, is it real? Now, this has been an ongoing argument now since the beginning of time, which doesn't exist. We have been arguing about this, all of us determining what's real, what's isn't. And it got to a certain point where people, Victorian age, finally sat down and said, this is what's real, this is the defined real, everyone else can basically fuck off. And we all were forced to conform to the one Victorian age definition of what is real, which is the physical realm. And the abstract concept was completely thrown out, which is why they killed scientists for a while, because scientists were exploring the abstract. And they didn't want to compromise their unchanging, closed-minded, closed-hearted concept of what is real, because they declared, with a toxic limiting belief, that the five senses are fact, and that's the problem. There's a lot of thinking that we have in our current society that comes from Victorian era, that comes from the 1600s. The patriarchy was invented by John Filmer. John Filmer was a philosopher in the year 1623. He wrote a paper about the patriarchy because he wanted to establish the hierarchy, which was also created by that mindset, where God, man, woman. And that came from John Filmer because he wanted to reinforce the importance of God. 1623 or 1626 is when that concept first came into existence by a very deliberate philosophical paper that was written in that time period. And here we are still practicing it. Like it's archaic and we're still like holding on to it. So there's a lot of 1600 mindset that's embedded very deeply into our culture that new thinkers, free thinkers are now questioning, not just questioning, but downright rejecting, going, it's a 500-year-old concept from an archaic mindset. We're all done with it. So there's the divide. Now, in addition to this divide, those free thinkers are also now opening their minds even further, saying the abstract world does exist. That was another thing that was banished back in that mindset. So if you want to basically evolve into this next level, it's really a concept of we need to change the way we think, because right now the way we think is based off of this 1600 mindset. It's archaic. Now, back to grounding. A perspective is your center. It's your grounding. When you go through healing and any kind of psychological work, what you are doing is actually purifying your perspective. You are restoring your perspective by defining what happened to you, what traumas occurred to you, what they mean. That's a whole lot of shadow work in there, so that you can restore your identity, what you value with your ethics, what your beliefs are, so you could perceive the actual reality of what did happen to you. It is an absolute restoration of your opinion. That's what it is. Now, here's the problem. 100% of all abusers. Abuse is when somebody tells you what their opinion is, but they present it as a fact. Your parents are all parents are this is what they do, is they present, people do this, all people do this. But when you have a person with a little offspring, that offspring deitizes the parent. So the parent says, this is X. Now, the offspring will take X, and instead of it being an opinion, they will glorify it, put it on a dais, and say, oh, that's a fact, because my mom and dad said so. And we all do this when we're children. Well, my mom and dad said X. Well, my dad said. And it's that concept that our ideas, our perceived reality is fact because it came from our parents. Our parents are flawed humans with a lot of mental disorders, just like we turn out to be. And as a result, we have this really, really problematic issue with the concept of fact versus opinion. Fact does not exist. So when you think about all of the times that you were abused, all of the invasive perspectives you received, at some point it was your abuser giving you a fact or giving them their opinion, and then shoving that opinion into your perspective, claiming that their perspective, their opinion was better than yours because their opinion is fact. That's the problem. So when you go into therapy, you are literally removing their opinions from your opinion. That's called purifying the perspective. That's grounding. Now, with traditional psychology, with modern psychology, they insist that what is fact is absolutely solid in the sense of the material plane. Use your five senses. But what they're not telling you is your five senses are absolutely an opinion also. It's not fact. However, opinion is what matters. We devalue opinion, and that's the problem. Opinion is the most important thing we have, and opinion is absolutely personal. 100%. Opinion is everything. Opinion is perspective, is imagination, is your personal experience. You have a collection and a series of information and data that's in your brain that is 100% unique to only you. The concept, walk in my shoes, really process what that means. Your eyes, your taste, your smell, your touch, your experiences, your perspective. 100% all of that is so unique to your makeup that there is so much uniqueness going on that no one person can ever be compared to another person because no one has ever walked in anybody else's shoes. It's not possible. That's why you have an opinion. The opinion is sacred. But our materialistic physical society trashes that from that 16th century mindset. Because the 16th century mindset is shitting on our opinions, we're now in a place where we devalue the importance of our own opinion. Perspective psychology says, oh, absolutely contraire. The perspective and the opinion is the God itself. It is the center. It is the ultimate truth. Because you are not experiencing life through 8 billion other people. You are experiencing your life only through you. So when you seek to ground, what you are really doing is restoring your perspective. That's what you are doing. To do that, you have to be alone, totally isolated, or with people who are like-minded. The problem is, a lot of people don't know who they are to find like-minded people. A lot of people do not see eye to eye with their relatives because their relatives have a really messed off metric from their abuse. They don't know who they are. So as a result, you have no like-minded community to reestablish and re-support who you are. So imagine you have this one single pole, your identity, your perspective, your like-mindedness, your perspective, your opinion, your truth. Ideally, you want people to support you. That way you're not alone. But it's really important that they, your community, conform to you, which means you need to make sure that you get a community that thinks like you. Likewise, if you flip it around, now you're looking at conformity. Conformity is the individual shaping and bending its metric, wearing a mask and lying, to the expectations of other people and a society based off of the 1600s. Flip that around, and now you've got your community that you are cherry picking to establish and support who and what your likeness is, what your ethics are. For instance, I'm a vegetarian. I'm going to go out of my way to make sure I have a community of vegetarians so that when I sit down to eat, my ethic isn't going to be questioned. If I go upstate and I'm now trying to have a meal with a bunch of fourth perspectives, and they're all telling me that I have to eat meat, which is what they do and did, and then they argue with me, suddenly instead of me enjoying a meal so that I'm ethically comfortable with it, I am now fighting for my right to express my ethics and my perspective. That's exhausting, isn't it? So why would I go home to my relatives when they're a fourth perspective mindset, they love their guns and their Trump, and I'm going, yeah, I'm a sixth perspective hippie with a severe respect for animals, so no thanks. So I head over to where I am. I go seek out a community that supports my mindset. I might have a few people over here who also enjoy me, or vegans. Now there I can't go because I love butter and milk too much and I bake. So vegans and vegetarians don't see eye to eye. And then there's people over there who are pescatarians. I go to sit down with pescatarians and we can respect each other's differences. And it'll be like okay, curious, good to know. But it's still exhausting because you're thinking in your mind, am I offending them? If I eat fish, is this vegetarian going to be offended? I'm over here going, okay, I need to make sure that There's no butter or milk in my food tonight when I have guests over because so-and-so is a vegan and I don't want to offend that person. This is exhausting. So after functioning in a society with a mindset like that all the time, you go home and it's your space where you can not worry about other people's perspectives and you can just be yourself and you can drop your guard because you don't have to worry about crossing boundaries or offending anybody. Now, if you have boundaries in place, that gets even better. But it's your safe place where you're free to celebrate yourself with like-minded people who also support who you are. And as a result, you can completely, subconsciously turn off the guard. That's what grounding is. You are subconsciously turning off the work and resting. But if you can't go home to your center and ground yourself there, your subconscious mind is still working to basically stay alert and stay on guard. You need to turn the fear system off, which is why so many of us are tired. It's because the fear system is working full throttle, making sure that boundaries aren't crossed, making sure that everybody's on the same page, making sure that all of this, it's exhausting. The subconscious mind is hard at work with the fear system in the subconscious mind, trying to keep you safe, trying to keep everybody else safe, trying to make sure that you stay in a place wearing a mask and telling lies, so that when you go home, you're supposed to be surrounded by people who support your ethics and your love and your celebration of life. So for me, I'm most at home around other vegetarians who are nerds and nonconformists in relationship anarchy. So that way I can be exactly who and everything and what I am without ever worrying about offending anybody there. I don't have to hide something about who I am, God forbid, because I don't want to. And it's a question every time I go out somewhere with that vegetarian thing. I'm going, if I tell them I'm a vegetarian, then I might have to deal with the whole, why are you a vegetarian? Red card. I can't talk about that. And then the flip side of it is I not tell them about it, and then I have to do my own private, okay, where can I get the non-vegetarian or the vegetarian food? It's exhausting. But when I'm back at home, I have that safe sanctuary where I can finally turn it off. I don't have to wear a mask. I don't have to filter. I can just relax. So what you are doing when you are grounding is you are reestablishing your perspective. You are reminding yourself what your perspective is because you wear so many masks out there that you forget who you are. So it's the remembering of the self. That is what grounding really is. That is what self-care really is. Self-care is actually allowing yourself the rest to turn off your fear system in your subconscious mind and remembering who you are. That's it. That is all self-care is. So when you pull together and you start to knit yourself a self-care regimen, when you start to put together your own concept of what is my self-care, you should be focusing on what's going to ground me and what's going to relax me, what's going to turn off my fear system, and what's going to turn off my subconscious mind. That is what you want to do. We're talking total slush brain, veg out. You sit down in front of whatever boring television you want that's yours, that allows you to not think. For me, that's Rick and Morty. Like for me, it's Doritos, it's nerd candy, and it's ice cream, Haagen-Dazs, while I watch Rick and Morty high. And that is I am resting and recharging. And I am 100% in my cozy, jammy comfort zone with my onesie. Now, the flip side of that is remembering who I am by closing out all of the noise, not being on social media where all of these opinions are coming in, telling me what I should think. No, I'm going to remember who I am by redefining my ethics and what I love. And the best way to do that is by surrounding myself with what I love, with what my ethics are, because the ethics are really, really the core of who you are. That's your grounding and that's your perspective. And then when you have a community, when you have friends who support you and they say, I'm just like you, I share the same weird interests. Great, I can connect now with you. I can give you, you can receive, you can give, and I can receive. We have that exchange, we're connecting. And it's re-solidifying that I am not alone, that I have community and belonging, that I know who I am, I have remembered. I know my name. I know where I'm going. These are my dreams. These are my dreams. Let's create our own perspective together. Now we have connection because we are both living in the same perspective. And that's what your relatives are supposed to do. That is what your community is supposed to do. So if you have an unsettled relative, if you have an abusive past, you can't use your relatives. So you go nomadic. You're now solo with literally 1/3 of your philosopher's compass missing. So you find friendships to supplement that. You find a partner to supplement that. And they become the anchor of your community, so you always know who you are in relative to this person. I'm going to say that one more time because that's really it. Who you are in relativity to. If you don't have something in relative, you cannot define yourself. That's why we have longitude and latitude. That's why in music theory we have the 1 chord and then the 5 chord, because the 1 chord and the 5 chord tell you who each other is. Without the 1 chord, you just got a note. And you don't know what you are, you have to have that. In philosophy, you have to have the identity and the relative. You must have 2 positions on a map, on a graph, to determine who you are. You must have a community. Now, your community literally can be the philosophies of dead people who wrote books. That's just what mine was. My philosophy was 100% based off of Socrates, Don Quixote, Shakespeare. They were my compass. They were my solid. These are their ethics. Van Gogh, 100% I was on board with him. I absolutely understood him. So I had a list of people who I was able to use as relativity to my own identity, so I always knew who I was. It was me versus, well, not versus, it was me and my relatives were a bunch of dead authors of the great books. So that's how I was able to find who I am. And then later, it's reaching out, finding friends, finding a community. The problem is if you have a subconscious mind that's programmed to find a narcissist, a subconscious mind that's programmed to keep you safe, it's going to take a relative, like a partner, a narcissist, plug it in now. This is the problem with narcissism. Now you have a relative that's a narcissist, and there's your identity. That's going to create the codependency, and now your identity is based off of what they need from you. And that's the problem. So in order to fix this, you need to first break down your subconscious mind, soothe your fear system, redefine yourself, and establish, basically set a solid example. Decide, okay, who do I want to be? This is why we dream. This is why we imagine. Who is your idol in life? Pick an idol. Once you have an established who you want to be like, that person needs to become your solid relative. That way you know who you are in relationship to. Now you can see how far off you are. I want to be like this person and I'm all the way over here. I got work to do. And that's when you start doing the mental work and it draws you closer to your relative until you are identical. Now you don't need this person anymore. You know who you are. You are and you have achieved what and who you want. Now you go out and you find somebody you do want if you still want this person. But now you're looking for something. By the way, when you go into therapy, this person becomes your therapist. This is what a therapist is. That's why we have therapists. That's it. Your therapist becomes the perspective. Now the therapist, this is the inside of therapy. It is an individual who says, let me talk to your identity. I'm going to set aside your fear system. I'm going to set aside your subconscious mind because those are all running off of your fears. I'm going to talk to your love system. What do you want? And then over time, the individual opens up and shares with the therapist, this is what I love, this is what I desire, this is what I want, this is what I dream. Well, that's going to become your center. Now the therapist, a good therapist, will take all of that juicy information and they will emanate it. This is what we do. This is exactly what we do. We take everything that we love and we become it for them. So a therapist actually acts like a mirror of the identity. We become the reminder of, remember your priority. So that you go off and you do your healing and your perspective is going to be basically where your mother wanted you, where your father wanted you, where your abusers put you. And the therapist is going to say, come back to me because I represent your identity. I am on the side of your identity. And that is what therapy is. Once you have that established, you can come back to your center and then create the relative string so you know who you are in relativity to your therapist. Now, that's when the therapist then goes away. And now it's your turn to go find an actual community, friends, lovers, partners, a husband, a wife, somebody that becomes that new established relative. Now you have community and you know who you are. If you love shit like this, like, subscribe, follow, comment below. Let me know what part of the show resonated with you. And join me in Authenticity City. I am building a community literally designed and built around world peace. If you want in on this community, take a look at the link below and go through my city directory. Decide which parts of it resonate with you and join me. Thank you so much, and may the kindest of words always find you.